So in this short section, we're going to compare and contrast cannabis to hemp, and then we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into what exactly hemp is and talk a little bit about the hemp industry. It used to be a really big industry, and it's starting to sort of come back, which I think is a good thing. So we'll look at some of those and then understand some of the different uses that we can use of the hemp plant and what the benefits are. So hemp, as we've talked about, hemp is a cousin to cannabis. Typically refers to the plant that is grown for either food, so it's the seeds that are a really great source of food and nutrition, also a really great source of a type of oil. And also the hemp is grown for its fibrous stalk. So we can make textiles out of that. There's companies that are making shoes and just fabric for pants and shirts and clothes. And there's all kinds of products that are starting to come out that are made of hemp fabric. And also textiles. So carpeting is a great use of the hemp plant. It would be comparable to making carpet or rugs out of wool. So very long lasting, very sturdy, and you can throw it in the compost once you're done with it. Regulations do require that any hemp plant or a plant that is grown as hemp must have a THC content that is less than 0.3%. So that's a very low THC content. You could smoke, 10 plants of hemp, and there's no way that you could become impaired from that. There's just not enough THC content in there. So that is what the regulations or the law requires, that anything that is grown as or sold as hemp does require to have that under 0.3% or under of THC content. Typically, the cannabis or the hemp plant does have more CBD in it than THC, and there are some CBD products that are being made from hemp, and that is another way that we can kind of see the difference. Another interesting thing about the cannabis plant is it's really good for soil remediation. So that just means it's really good for cleaning up land or soil that has had heavy metal contaminants. So maybe an old mining area or a place where there's been a chemical spill, or just where areas where someone wants to use it as farmland, but it just is naturally occurring very high in heavy metals that aren't, kind of poisonous for us to ingest them. So the hemp plant is really great about putting down its roots, and it pulls a lot of those contaminants up into the plant itself. And then those plants, we wouldn't want to ingest those plants if it's grown on contaminated soil, but then that and the heavy metals that it's pulled out of the soil can then be disposed of properly. So really great soil remediation plant that can be grown in that way. There's not a lot of that that's going on yet, but it's starting to happen. And even in areas, if there's been a radiation spill, so in places where there's been nuclear accidents from nuclear areas, the cannabis plant or the hemp plant has been used to help remediate that soil. It can be a bit of a long process. It may not just happen in one growing season. It might happen in several growing seasons. So unlike cannabis, where we're growing for the medicinal qualities of that, so lots of terpenes, we want that plant to have lots of room, lots of space for it to grow tall and space for it to be nice and bushy. For industrial hemp, we want that, especially if we're using it for fiber, we want the plant to have lots of room to grow vertically, but they can grow quite close together, which is fine. The plant doesn't mind. In fact, it will grow much taller if they're spaced close together, because each plant is going to be reaching up to get that light. So grown close together, it's really prized for the nutritional seeds and that unique fiber. Interesting thing about hemp, it has been legal to cultivate in Canada since 1998, but it was still really difficult to get a license to grow hemp. You used to have it like fenced all around, have security fencing. Some of the excuses from the authorities say, well, people won't be able to tell the difference between a cannabis plant and a hemp plant. Well, if someone steals a bunch of flowers from a hemp plant and try smoking it or using it to get high from, it's not going to happen. They can smoke all they want, it won't happen. So the regulations are starting to relax a little bit. One thing about growing hemp in the prairie provinces of Canada, it's a really great area. It loves growing in the prairie provinces, and we've starting to get a really thriving cannabis market starting to happen. A lot of farmers are maybe switching over from wheat or rye or barley, some of those, or maybe switching their fields up every couple years. And so we're really just in the beginning of this resurgence of the hemp industry in Canada. It's pretty exciting, actually. Industrial hemp is currently regulated by Health Canada under the Cannabis Act. So Health Canada issues the cultivation licenses, but not, it's under the Cannabis Act, but it's called the Industrial Hemp Regulations. So if you're looking that up, you can just do a Google search for Government of Canada Regulations of Industrial Hemp Seed, and you'll find all the regulations there. There's some really interesting products that are starting to happen. There's a company up near Edmonton in Alberta that is creating the equipment for harvesting the hemp plant. Our traditional equipment for harvesting wheat or barley, those kind of, canola, those kind of traditional plants that are grown on the Canadian prairies, it's not sturdy enough to harvest the hemp because the fiber in the hemp is so strong and fibrous that it will just get wrapped around and clog up those other machinery. So some companies are starting to go into their old barns and pull out some of that equipment that was used 100 years ago and see if they can make that again. But there's also companies that are starting to recreate that machinery that can be used for that. And also the processing of the hemp does require some special machinery as well. And so there's a company up in Edmonton that is, I believe, the first in North America that is starting to do that. So we're going to start to see, if you pay attention to the hemp industry, we'll start to see these little micro companies that will start to pop up. And as the regulations relax and farmers start to take notice of this and realize that it is a really great viable cash crop, and manufacturers and start to realize, oh, we can, start to make textiles and make carpeting and maybe make some curtains, make the hempcrete out of that as well. It's pretty exciting time for getting into the hemp industry. So we talked about cannabinoids, and we talked a little bit about the hemp plant does have a fairly significant amount of CBD, but definitely not the amount of CBD that we would find from a cannabis plant. So if we were to harvest a cannabis plant, the amount of CBD, if it has been bred to be high in CBD, the amount of CBD we can get out of that plant is quite high compared to the cannabis plant or the hemp plant. We get some CBD out of it, but what we can do is take a vast amount or a field full of the hemp plant, and we can pull the cannabinoids, the CBD, out of that, and then we have a viable product that we can sell as a concentrated hemp CBD product. We can get both CBD isolate, which is just a pure CBD, so where they use special equipment to go in and just extract the CBD molecule out of the hemp plant or the hemp material, or we can have what's called a full spectrum CBD, where it's more like the way they're pulling the CBD out of the cannabis plant, where you get some of the other materials as well. Some people like that full spectrum CBD. Others think that the concentrated CBD extract is a better product, and I think there's areas of use for both. You will find Health Canada, I believe in 2018, gave license to cannabis producers to bump up the CBD content with CBD from the hemp plant. Some of the manufacturers may or may not be doing that, and they may or may not disclose that they're doing that. So if you see some products coming out, a CBD oil that is quite high in CBD, if they don't disclose it on the website, you may want to give the manufacturer a call and just ask them if it's coming from CBD or if it's all from cannabis or if it's a little bit of both. It doesn't really matter in my mind. The CBD is going to do the same job in the body, whether it comes from cannabis or whether it comes from hemp. But some people just like to know that. So even though CBD does not cause impairment, you can take as much of it as you want. There's no way that you will get high or impaired from that. It is still tightly regulated in both Canada, the United States, and other parts of the world. That is starting to ease off a little bit, but I suspect it's going to be a few more years before we find CBD as being available and less regulated as a non-impairing product. So the Cannabis Act and the regulations do not distinguish between CBD derived from industrial hemp and CBD derived from cannabis with greater than 0.3% THC. And the hemp CBD is often more economical. So we'll often see hemp-based CBD products, especially in the veterinary industry right now, which isn't quite as regulated as the human medicinal industry. So we'll see it a lot for veterinary products. Just know that unregulated hemp-based CBD products may not have been tested for impurities the way the cannabis is, unless you're getting that product from a licensed producer. And the licensed producers are required by law to do contaminants testing to make sure that you don't have contaminants in your product. So remember, I talked a little bit earlier about how hemp is a great for soil remediation, so it can actually pull the heavy metals and other contaminants and toxins out of the soil. Well, that doesn't just magically make those disappear. That's then going to be in your hemp-based products. So those plants really need to be tested for contaminants, and if they do have contaminants, that has to be properly disposed of. So as I said, this will probably change as time goes on and the governing bodies and authorities get a little bit more comfortable with non-impairing CBD products and ones that have come from hemp. And as the hemp industry really starts to kind of mature a little bit more, we have a lot of startups right now, but as it matures more, the public starts to demand it. I think we'll also see some easing off of some of those regulations, because it will become actually a really viable part of our economy as far as being able to produce and manufacture goods out of the hemp plant. Like I said, the hemp grows really well in not just the prairie provinces, but in a lot of areas of Canada. It's a really viable agricultural product. Hemp seeds have been around for quite a while. There's a company called Manitoba Harvest that has been selling hemp seeds for quite a while. There are other companies now out there selling hemp seeds, but these guys kind of were really groundbreakers when they first started getting into the hemp seed business back in the early 2000s. Hemp seeds are used as food. They've had that kind of hard outer husk has been removed for them. So sometimes they're referred to as hemp hearts instead of just hemp seeds. And that kind of distinguishes the difference between whether that hard outer shell is still on there or whether that's been cracked open and taken off. These are a really great source of omega-3 fatty acids. They've got a couple of B vitamins in there, which is folate and B6. Also a really good source of iron and zinc, so really nutritious seeds. It's also a good source of protein, contains all 9 of our essential amino acids. So 3 tablespoons of hemp hearts contain about 9.5 grams of plant-based protein. So you can see that's a nice way to get replace some of the animal-based proteins if that's something that you're looking to do. And there's some really great products out there now that are hemp-based protein powders that has that protein even a little bit more concentrated as well. They're also a really good source of fiber, the hemp seeds or hemp hearts, and they're a really great way to manage constipation. I do caution you though, if you've never used hemp hearts before, then you might want to start with maybe just a teaspoon a day and let your body become used to the extra fiber, and then maybe build it up to a tablespoon or even up to 3 tablespoons a day. They're a great addition to throw into your smoothie if you have a blender that's is powerful enough to kind of break them down, and it adds a nice bit of protein and fiber to your smoothie, and it also kind of creates a nice smooth consistency to the smoothie as well. It'll thicken it up a little bit. We can also press the hemp seed oils, the hemp seeds, to get a really beautiful oil out of it. And that oil has all the omega-3s in it that we also find in the hemp heart itself. It doesn't contain any cannabinoids or THC or CBD in that. There are some products that are being kind of falsely marketed as the hemp seed oil containing CBD. There may be trace amounts in there, but not enough to be using as CBD as a medicinal product. But it's still a really great product with lots of omega-3s in there. And omega-3 is very anti-inflammatory in itself. It's really good for the brain. So you'll get a lot of benefits of that. The hemp seed oil, once it's been pressed, it has quite a short shelf life. So if you are purchasing it from a store, always buy it in small bottles. You want the bottles to not be clear, so you want a dark bottle so that no sunlight gets in, which will start to degrade it. And you want to make sure that the store is keeping your hemp seed oil in a refrigerated area of the store. And when you bring it home, you want to keep it in the fridge as well. Once it's at room temperature, it will go rancid really quickly. Rancid hemp seed oil is kind of like turpentine. It's not a good product for your body. So buy small bottles, keep it in the fridge, keep it nice and fresh, and you can use that. It's not for cooking. It has a very low smoking point, so it's really not a good oil to cook with at all or heat at all, but it's really great for salad dressings or even throwing a tablespoon into your smoothie or adding it into even things like once you've made some mashed potatoes and they've cooled off a little bit, you can, if you needed to sneak a little bit of nutrition in for your kids, you can add a little bit of oil, hemp seed oil, into that as well. So lots of great ways to use it. My favorite way is using it as a base for a salad dressing. Really adds some nutrition to your salad as well. So that's just a really quick introduction to the kind of early days of the hemp industry in Canada and the difference between hemp and cannabis and some of the products that we might start to see in the future as the hemp industry starts to gear up.